でもいいかもしんない。
The Sharp X68000 is a computer I know nothing about, so when Castlevania Chronicles landed on the original PlayStation back in 2001, it came as a huge surprise that it contained a video game from yesteryear that I had never heard of, plus a shiny new mode, Run-On Sentence. Original retains the classic Simon look with the graphics, gameplay, and music from the 1993 home computer kit. Alternatively arranged features a remixed soundtrack along with slight graphical changes and some tweaks to the overall difficulty. Note how I'm purposefully not referring to this mode as an improvement, because visually our Belmont has never looked worse. It comes down to taste, but I've never understood what Ayami Kojima was going for here. Fluorescent Gatorade Dance Club Simon is kind of awful to look at. Admittedly, I'm not exactly an anime guy, but her design work elsewhere resonates with me. She's an excellent illustrator. This is a mess. What even is this color? More often than not, this franchise has slid into the silly. I mean, the original was an homage to horror movie archetypes and didn't take itself too seriously, but there was still a bit of grit. That is, until the almighty Iga took the throne. I dig the search action something of the somethings, but he went straight up cartoon goofy with them sometimes. The X68000 game released only a few months before another terrific exclusive for Japanese hardware. Between July of 93 and March 94, they received 3 of the best entries in the entire series, 2 of my top 3, each predominantly spearheaded by different people. The only reason I'm so critical of the franchise during Igarashi's tenure as overseer is because we were no longer getting variety. Konami experimented a few times with different things before throwing in the towel and settling into a something of the something groove, leaving Hitoshi Akamatsu's traditional westernized horror vision in the dust. All I'm saying is that I'd love to live in a world where both could have continued to exist. Maybe throw more adventures into the mix with a style similar to the N64 titles. It would have been pretty good. To be fair, Iga only acted as producer on Belmont Bondage Chronicles. Hideo Ueda, who worked on a lot of Nintendo exclusives for Konami, directed the 1993 original. Masayuki Umasaki, who had far fewer, if any, ties with the company before or after, was given the reins here. The entire package feels like a late attempt at catching in on the Castlevania name. I'm glad it exists, but even at the time I found it underwhelming. After Symphony of the Night, we got Legends on the Game Boy, which was as bland as a Rob Brydon-hosted panel show. Then a double misfire with the 2 N64 entries. I mean, I liked them, but very few did. Circle of the Moon was a hit, but I think a lot of its popularity was wrapped up in the hype of the release of the brand new Game Boy Advance device it was featured on. Of course, Iga himself has since retconned both, and Legends from the official timeline, a move that has always rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, how self-serious and arrogant. Okay, anyway. Sexy, shiny glam rock Simon would be nothing in his snazzy new duds without a fresh take on his theme tunes. Battle Belmont, now with matching accessories. Grandpa Munster Nemesis kits sold separately. The backgrounds have barely been touched, which makes these changes especially incohesive. Basically what I'm saying is Simon and the Count stick out like sore thumbs. Superfluous. Almost like they had to tinker with a few things to resell this package. I'm really not seeing that Ayami Kojima quality here. Maybe it was rushed, or perhaps she struggled marrying the disparate styles. One can only speculate. This package at its core is the Sharp X68000 version. There are a bunch of tweaks in the arranged mode, items, enemies, too many to really go through piecemeal. There will be enough comparison shots throughout this review, but basically the newer one has cheaper looking cutscenes with some minor narrative differences. Naturally, some will dig the polygonal stuff. I think bargain bin CG looks terrible, so of course I'm partial to the original style. One thing I'll commend is the enhanced lighting during gameplay. Most candles radiate off backgrounds and it looks so goddamn badhead good. Some tunes are improvements, others aren't. A few don't fit, a handful do. Clearly, everyone is going to have their own preferences. There are some classic tracks from the 8 and 16-bit Nintendo titles. Naturally, Bloody Tears is here because of course it is. This time accompanied by a weeping Athena. Nice. The The arranged mode has some other features, a time attack, and ranking, really the bare minimum. Did I mention these illustrations by Ayami? If it wasn't clear they were phoning it in, there are only a couple from Chronicles included, the rest are from Symphony and Rondo. There are a sufficient amount of options, but I would have taken some other game modes or features. Now, I'm not going to sit here and regurgitate Wikipedia facts at you verbatim. I've never touched the X68000, so I only know how it sounds from the little I've heard online. From the bit I've read over the years, there were multiple audio options with a hidden MIDI extra included by this team for this soundtrack. Computers had a wide range of sound cards back then, we all know that, so it's not exactly sorcery, but this Japanese hardware is still interesting. I've tried and failed to emulate any of the software, but I managed to catch someone online tinkering with the music on a Mister. The differences were pretty substantial. If you're interested in a more in-depth breakdown by those who have actually touched the kit, there are better places to visit. I'd highly recommend hearing what this behemoth can do. It's impressive. Size does matter. I read somewhere that the trigger buttons switched between sound modules, but that myth be busted. From what I can tell, this Chronicles edition for the PS1 lacks the option to experiment with the different channels at all, but it does have a nifty sampler presented in a super sleek way. Who can argue with a goddamn bathead? Shin-chan, Kaizo Nakamura, Hiroshi Kobayashi appear to be the main composers of the original soundtrack, with the latter being the most outspoken over the years about their time with the machine. Overall, I really dig the music. There's a lot of grit, raunchy rock and roll. I think fans of heavy metal video game covers will really get a kick out of this stuff. Remakes, the originals, all solid. Morricone ripoff in a Castlevania game, huh? Bold, that was a choice, I suppose. There's an introduction here, and it's nice to be given a bit of context. The 8-bit original had the iconic gate strut. On the Super NES, a wall of text. Haunted Castle doesn't exist. The first stage is laid out almost exactly as it was in the first Castlevania. It's a wonderfully lively recreation with rich colors and well-drawn details. Literally and figuratively, out of the gate, it's hard to ignore Simon's stride or the Slim Jim snap of his whip. But yeah, this is definitely that iconic vampire killer of an introduction to the series as a whole we've revisited half a dozen times by this point.
Turn to the spice! Snap out of it!
I've always had a soft spot for the bat, and this is the best one yet. They managed to give it a bit more character, both visually as well as gameplay-wise. No freeze frames, a huge oversight. Why am I even continuing when it's clear these developers didn't care? Iga's company didn't rectify this with their arranged mode. Too busy carpet bombing Circle of the Moon, he had bigger fish to fry. Look at these mermen, some of the best looking in the series. These drapes, the enemies are designed extremely well from start to finish. I'm surprised they weren't given glow sticks and ankle warmers to match Simon's sass. The aqueduct is the first new environment. It's confusing, jarring even. How does an opulent castle entryway lead to a series of underground caves deep enough to conclude with a water climb this high? It's an early 90s action platformer. Interconnectivity isn't crucial, I get it, but it's hard to not be disappointed by this nonsensical progression when we were already shown how to do it right so many moons ago. In other words, this second stage wouldn't feel so hastily placed if the first Castlevania wasn't so deliberate in its overall design. A trapdoor into a pit would have explained everything, something developers in this series have effectively done at least twice. Small potatoes, definitely a nitpick, but tough for me to ignore. The layout does get better, but maybe this could have been an exterior region before the castle gates, similar to the handful in the first SNES outing or Dracula's Curse. The next couple of areas are equally as confusing from a geographical standpoint, but first, this. Why is this so unforgiving? Get hit by anything and it's into the drink. The arranged version disables knockback, which is a huge help, but man, this is crap. It's off-putting, uneven, and cruel. In 2001, I had beaten every title in this series. Challenging action platformers were my thing back then, not boasting. I just grew up loving the style of game and dug the difficulty. I'm no pro, but I think my opinion on balance, at the very least in this genre, should hold some water. This sequence repels me. A harbinger of things to come. I don't know if it's the inclusion of a save feature or the fact that the X68000 was aimed at an older audience, but this shows that these developers are willing to play dirty. Of course, it's possible, and no, it's not the toughest thing ever, but it's an off-putting jolt. Bouncing around, catapulting into the water, obnoxious. Goddamn bathead. Simon shuffles around like there's a 10-pound turd in his drawers, but that's nothing new. His walk cycle has always been weird, borderline inappropriate. What I find distracting is how he seems to bounce a bit more than before, and is it just me, or is he a noticeable smidge slower at absolutely everything? Whipping, weapons, 2 upgrades as usual. This ain't no Super Castlevania 4, so 8-way whipping is no longer a thing, but it's possible to at least strike down and diagonally to the floor mid-jump, which is oddly more useful than you could possibly imagine for such a weird arc. This is neither here nor there, but it's weird how Bloodlines would pull a 180 on this a year later by allowing its best Belmont impersonator to strike 45 degrees skyward. Both are satisfying twists to the traditional stiff whip controls. There's also a bit more maneuverability in the air overall, especially in the arranged version, but platforming still requires a great deal of precision. Leaping on and off stairs isn't possible, which may have been fine in '93, but by early 2000 standards it felt limited. I'll put it this way, I was still riding the Circle of the Moon and Symphony of the Night high. The first Castlevania is my favorite in the series, hands down, but the platforming and enemy placements were designed around the stiff controls. This remake has shit being tossed at Simon from every which way, and most of it moves quicker than an unsuspecting player can react to. I keep belaboring the point, but it's like shuffling around a bag of rocks getting this dude to do anything. Everything else is par for the course. Slabs etched with Roman numerals deploy multiple projectiles. At the very least, these are more generously peppered throughout the stages. It's still possible to force them to drop early by using the sub-weapons often. Naturally, the knife is everywhere. In case things weren't difficult enough, we're still doing that dagger thing where it's trying to trip you up. Axe and its arc stopwatch to freeze time. I really like the visual effect where the color changes. The cross still rules, but for whatever reason I find it more noticeable that it won't reach the edge of the screen here. Rare marijuana refills life on the go at the low cost of 10 hearts. This is the real game changer. Hang on to that weed, stash that. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the holy water once again feels awful to use. It inflicts a decent amount of damage against specific enemy types, but the splash range is annoyingly small. Why do they keep messing with this? The arc. Also, baddies tend to back away from it like they're reading inputs. It's more hassle than it's worth. Stick to the cross. Jugs offer invincibility for an extremely limited amount of time, and the rosary is still the screen nuke. There's a lot of attention to detail. I can't praise these visuals enough. There are callbacks, Easter eggs, secrets, beating this vendor like we're playing the MSX game.
What are you buying?
These twisted environments are beautiful, and this won't be the last time I say it. Sometimes events subvert expectations, occasionally at the player's expense. Plug it, just plug this hole. Why is everything so mean? A constant bombardment of baddies. Even in the first couple of areas, the bats don't stop, you know? It's really cool watching them fly in front and behind objects, entering through openings, the attention to detail, drapes blowing in the breeze. Seems like I really have a thing for these windows. The scrolling in the second stage is great. Seeing the goblins approaching the idle skeletal dragon. Is this the boss we come up against later? Lore implications, arrows stay stuck. Everything is souls. More questions. How did Simon reach the front gate when this castle is so high? Is it in heaven? Why are we this color? Have I mentioned that I'm not a fan of this color? Are we finally gonna get to the next area? Maybe after we take a peek at this wicked awesome map screen that the Mondo illustrators clearly saw at least once when drawing up their album design. Wicked cool, wicked child. I've gotta say the arranged version doesn't really fit the style of the game or do the original track much justice, but goddamn bathead do I ever dig it. Stick to your leather straps and leg warmers, this SOB be bitchin' with bling. Translation, Simon of Belmont be bitchin' with bling. Nosferatu, wizards, wonderful. Bloodlines borrowed quite a few graphical elements. Again with the Bloodlines. Of all the Castlevania games, I'd say that 16-bit Sega entry reminds me of this one the most. Evidently I can't go one video without referencing it multiple times, so now that we've revisited it twice, let's tick it off the list. Can anyone tell me why these frogs are so fast, or how an ice cavern exists under this Alucard slop garden? Throw it all in. But you see what I mean now about the geographical confusion, right? Where are we? Drax got a mega mud room, dude. Radical. Wait, what? Okay, never mind. We've been inside this entire time? This is reminiscent of stage 2 from the original Castlevania. You know, after you beat the bat, you make that climb in the red room. All of these vertical stretches are the worst. These red skeletons respawn too quickly. Cool that we witnessed their origins, Soulsian blood and ring lore. No divine weapons to strike them permanently dead. Too much. There's too much going on. Anytime you need to work your way up in this game, you're totally fucked. Chip, chip, chip away at that health bar. Game over, continue, save load. Game over, continue, densely packed murder towers pelting non-stop. Enemy hail upon Belmont's bountiful mullet.
Bouncy bountiful mullet.
Health replenishing wall meats are rare because why would they throw you a bone? A crazy quick Medusa. Now I see where Rondo of Blood and Bloodlines got the design. These stages aren't too long and the checkpoints are generous. I really do love the environments, but progression feels slow, partially due to Simon's cement shoe stride, but mostly because all of these stages are so goddamn bathead dense with enemies and projectiles. In a lot of ways, this clock tower is the best in the entire series. One thing I haven't gotten into in any of my Castlevania videos is how awful the gears in most of these games are to move around on. It's a real problem. These, on the other hand, are so good. Night and day. The music continues to be amazing. I love the background depth and movement, but everything's just dumping the entire time. We can wave goodbye to the footage from original mode because I've never been able to defeat She-Wolf. It's more about the short stretch up to her than the battle itself. Like most Castlevania games, nothing removes a single tick of health. It's a chunk or nothing. I have yet to get a groove going, but I hope someday it clicks because this original mode tantalizes me. Look at this. Rogue cogs, irritating eyeballs. Another thing I've never driven home in any of these videos is how much these eyes trip me up. Eat it. Now I understand how people who don't gel with the first NES title feel, even if there really is no penalty, because for once in this series, the screen scrolls and it's not insta-death. In all honesty, finishing a classic entry in this series in what can only ostensibly be described as easy mode, it kinda hurts. It feels bad. I want to earn it. I legitimately want to love this game. Symphony of the Night is fantastic, but it's a relative breeze. I feel something learning these levels, but I'm just not there yet. Chronicles and I are on a break. This is beautiful stuff. I'm a sucker for that throne room view in any and all of these games. The climb sucked, but totally worth it for this doppelganger boss. How cool is this? I find it similar to the sooooo battle from Belmont's Revenge. Tight, tough, with great animations. This presentation really knocks it out of the park. Have I mentioned how much I love these visuals? Just look at this monster Frankie. The laboratory pursues you for a bit. It's not a traditional boss battle, but it's fresh, inspired, and most of all, it looks ripped straight from a Hammer horror flick. For once, I don't fear the Reaper. It's a pushover here, but this could be the first time I was ever out of time in a Castlevania game. Oh, I can't stop. That one was for me, and that tune isn't even in the game. The hallway leading to the chambers is horrific in that filthy cinematic 70s style. Very impressive, artistic stuff. Apparently the scenery changes depending on the computer's internal clock, as do the hands while facing the wolf boss. See how I'm torn? Clearly I want to love this. The bosses aren't exactly balanced, but they're dynamic. Easily top 3 in the classic series, behind Bloodlines and Rondo of Blood. They even bust out desperation moves, something Rondo of Blood half-assed, but here in Chronicles, they do damage. It's really awesome. From beginning to end, these big bads are badass. Like I said, even the bat is badass. Badass goddamn Bathead. One of these days, I will finish the original mode. Castlevania Chronicles is everywhere on PlayStation devices. I used to own it physically, but traded it somewhere between first and second year college, probably for something stupid. It was a mid to late generation release, so it's rare and expensive. The good thing, it's available digitally on the cheap, you know, until Sony stops giving a shit and pulls a PlayStation or a Nintendo or a Game Pass, or yeah, you know, not owning things is brutal. Konami has been doing an adequate job compiling their popular titles, but a lot of these lesser known games continue to be absent from collections. Igarashi is the golden child, but for goddamn Bathead's sake, could we just get an N64 package? How about a bundle with this, the Famicom original, the first SNES entry, and Vampire Killer for the MSX? You can keep Haunted Castle as a figment of someone's imagination out there somewhere, a nightmare someone had on Quaaludes back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Like, just basically all these remakes of the first Castlevania. Bundle them up. Next time on this channel, a sequel to Castlevania Chronicles. How is this possible? Will it be the best thing since carved wall meat? Tune in next time. Same bat date, same bat channel. Farts, farts, poop, poop, this game sucks. It's just disappointing.